In the grand, marble-floored mansion, with walls adorned by priceless paintings and shelves stacked with rare books, he sat alone. A successful millionaire by all outward measures, he should have been content. Yet, there was a gnawing emptiness that refused to be ignored. His wealth, once a source of pride, now felt more like a heavy cloak, luxurious, but stifling. At 58, the man had achieved everything he ever dreamed of: mansions, private jets, luxury cars, and an exclusive circle of high-profile friends. But there was something missing. Something that no amount of money could fill. The echo of laughter that should have filled his home was absent. One late evening, as he sat by the grand fireplace, the soft flicker of the flames casting shadows on the walls, his mind wandered. He had always been busy with work, making deals, expanding his empire, but now, in the stillness of his empty house, he couldn't escape the sense of loneliness. Was this really all there was to life? His thoughts were interrupted when a close friend of his, someone who had worked alongside him for many years, called with a proposition. It wasn't business, but something far more personal. "There's a group of girls," his friend said, "who have been in and out of foster care for years. No one wants them. They're older, not babies anymore. But they're good kids, just lost. I think you might be able to help them." The idea was unthinkable at first. Adoption? At his age? It seemed absurd. The millionaire had never considered children, let alone the responsibility of raising 7 girls from broken homes. But the more he thought about it, the more something stirred within him. He couldn't shake the image of those girls, abandoned and forgotten by a world that didn't want them. For the first time in his life, he felt a responsibility that transcended profit margins and business ventures. What if he could give them a future? A chance to heal from the past they never chose? After a restless night of contemplation, he made the decision. He contacted the agency, agreeing to meet the girls. The first time they walked into his mansion, it was a mixture of awe and hesitation. The girls, aged from 7 to 15, came from different backgrounds. Each had their own scars, both visible and hidden. Some were quiet, their eyes filled with fear. Others were brash, defensive, unwilling to trust this strange, wealthy man who had suddenly become their new father. But the millionaire, despite his own uncertainty, was determined. He wasn't looking for perfection, just a chance to offer them something different. He promised himself that he wouldn't let them down, even though he had no idea what he was getting into. This decision, impulsive yet full of hope, would set them all on a journey neither of them could have predicted. His home, once a place of solitude, now had life. The air was filled with the sounds of footsteps, of chatter, and even the occasional burst of laughter. But the transition wasn't easy. The girls had their own battles to face, battles they couldn't fight alone. The millionaire was learning that love wasn't just about providing material things. It was about giving them a safe place to heal, to trust again. But trust didn't come easily. The girls had been abandoned too many times. The millionaire would soon learn that his wealth could not protect them from the pain of their pasts. He had to figure out how to break down the walls they had built, one painful step at a time. And so, his journey as a father began, not with grand gestures or celebrations, but with small, quiet moments. It was a path of patience, understanding, and sacrifice, a path that would lead them all to a place none of them had ever dreamed possible. But for now, in the stillness of the mansion, there was only uncertainty. What had he truly signed up for? And, more importantly, could he give these girls the love and stability they so desperately needed? He had no answers, but for the first time in years, he felt something stirring inside him. Hope. The first few weeks were rough. The millionaire quickly realized that the grand gestures he had planned meant little compared to the complex emotions of the girls he had just taken in. On the surface, his mansion, with its vast rooms and expensive decor, seemed like the ideal place for them to start fresh. But inside, the girls had to adjust to a life so different from the one they had known. The youngest, barely 7, clung to her old, tattered backpack as if it were a lifeline. She had a hard time believing that this new house was hers to stay in, as if she were waiting for someone to come and take it all away. Her older sisters, who were closer to their teens, seemed more skeptical. They were grateful for the roof over their heads, but resentful of how easy it appeared for the millionaire to buy their trust. Their eyes, however, betrayed their true feelings. Deep down, they all wanted to believe in the possibility of a better life. For the millionaire, it was a slow realization. No amount of money could buy trust, and no lavish gifts could replace the feeling of security that the girls had never known. The girls had been through too much, abandoned, neglected, and passed from home to home like unwanted possessions. They didn't know what it felt like to have a stable, loving home. The millionaire had been prepared to provide for them financially, but he had not been prepared for the emotional strain that came with adopting 7 girls from broken homes. The first breakthrough came when one of the older girls, 13 years old, finally broke down one evening in front of him. She had been quiet since her arrival, her demeanor distant, almost aloof. The millionaire had tried talking to her multiple times, but she always brushed him off. That night, however, she came to him, tears streaming down her face. "I don't know how to do this," she whispered, voice trembling. "I don't know how to trust again. Every time I think I've found something good, it's ripped away." In that moment, the millionaire saw her, really saw her. She wasn't a problem child or an ungrateful teenager, she was a girl who had been betrayed by the world. He hugged her, holding her close, not knowing what to say, but silently vowing to make sure she never had to face such betrayal again. The next few days were filled with small moments that slowly chipped away at the walls the girls had built around themselves. But the road ahead was never easy. The girls, despite their growing attachment to him, still struggled with the idea of permanence. The idea of being loved without conditions was foreign to them. There were moments when the millionaire found himself questioning his ability to do this. He had no idea how to parent. He had always been a businessman, managing projects, people, and deals, not children. He didn't know how to deal with the emotional needs of girls who had been hurt so badly. How could he possibly help them heal when he didn't understand their pain? He spent hours reading parenting books, trying to learn how to deal with their trauma, but nothing prepared him for the silent, invisible wounds they carried. At times, they would retreat into their rooms for hours, shutting themselves off from the world, from him. It was during these times that the millionaire's heart ached most. He knew that the road ahead wouldn't be easy. But amidst all the struggle, there were breakthroughs. Slowly but surely, the girls started to open up. They began to talk about their pasts, not the details, but the feelings. And the millionaire began to understand just how much they had been through. He wasn't just a father figure now, he was a protector, a guide, someone who had the power to change the course of their lives. But it would take time, patience, sacrifice, and a willingness to face his own fears. For now, though, the mansion was filled with a strange mixture of emotions. There was laughter, yes, but also tears. There were moments of joy, but also moments of doubt. And the millionaire found himself, for the first time in his life, questioning the meaning of success. Was it really about money, or was it about something deeper? As he stood at the window one evening, watching the girls play in the garden, their laughter a reminder of how far they'd come, he knew one thing for sure, they were his daughters now. And no matter how difficult the journey, he was committed to seeing it through. Because for the first time in years, he didn't feel alone. He had a family, one that he was ready to fight for, no matter what. The first year passed in a blur of challenges and small triumphs, but it was clear that the girls were adjusting to their new lives. They were no longer the strangers they had once been, each learning the routines of the mansion and each slowly becoming more comfortable in the presence of their adoptive father. But while their lives inside the mansion were beginning to stabilize, the world outside was far less welcoming. The millionaire had never fully grasped the depth of racial prejudice until it directly affected the girls. Though he had grown up in a world of affluence, he had lived a sheltered life, free from many of the harsh realities that those without power faced. His wealth had insulated him, but for his daughters, every step outside the mansion's gates was a reminder that they were different. It started with the subtle stares at school. The girls were enrolled in a prestigious private institution that catered to children of wealthy families, but the school had never seen children like them, black girls, from broken homes, who didn't fit the picture-perfect image of the other students. The girls were no strangers to being treated differently, but the sting of discrimination still cut deep. One afternoon, after a week of whispered comments and cold shoulders, the 12-year-old came home visibly upset. She refused to eat dinner, pushing her plate away, her face contorted with emotion. When the millionaire gently asked what was wrong, her lip trembled as she spoke. "They laughed at me again," she said, her voice barely audible. "They called me names. I don't fit in there. I don't belong." The millionaire sat down beside her, feeling an unfamiliar sense of helplessness. No amount of money could shield his daughters from the cruelty of the world. He had believed that giving them a better life would protect them from such hurt, but the more he saw the pain in their eyes, the more he realized how wrong he had been. It wasn't just about giving them material wealth or an education, it was about giving them the strength to face a world that didn't want them to succeed. The next day, the millionaire decided to take action. He went to the school to speak with the headmaster, demanding that the school take responsibility for the toxic environment the girls were being subjected to. But when he walked into the principal's office, he was met with a cool reception. The headmaster, a well-groomed man who had spent his entire career managing children of privilege, didn't know how to respond to a millionaire demanding that racial prejudice be addressed. He was uncomfortable, fumbling for words, but ultimately offered little more than empty promises. "Sir, I assure you, we have programs in place for inclusivity. But these things take time to address," the principal said, clearly dismissing the gravity of the situation. The millionaire left the meeting feeling angrier than he had in years. The frustration of knowing that he couldn't protect his daughters from the systemic biases that plagued society was overwhelming. He wasn't just angry at the school, but at the world that allowed such hatred to exist. How could a system that prided itself on excellence ignore the emotional toll it was taking on his daughters? That evening, as the millionaire sat in his office, poring over documents, his thoughts were interrupted by a soft knock on the door. It was one of the girls, the quietest one, the one who had struggled most with the transition. She stood in the doorway, her eyes downcast, unsure of what to say. "Is everything okay?" the millionaire asked gently. She nodded, her hands nervously twisting the hem of her sleeve. "I don't want to go back there," she confessed, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't want to be treated like I'm different just because of the way I look." In that moment, the millionaire realized the true depth of the challenge he faced. It wasn't enough to just give them a safe, loving home. He had to teach them how to navigate a world that would never fully accept them. And that was going to be the hardest part. But rather than retreat, the millionaire made a promise to himself. He would not let this world break his daughters. He would teach them to stand tall, to be proud of who they were, and to fight back against the injustice they would inevitably face. He called a family meeting that evening, gathering the girls in the living room. He spoke openly about the prejudice they would encounter, acknowledging the pain they were feeling, but encouraging them to never let anyone make them feel less than they were. "You are beautiful," he said, his voice strong and reassuring. "And no one can take that away from you. I will fight for you, but more importantly, you need to fight for yourselves. The world may not always be kind, but you have the strength to rise above it." The words were simple, but to the girls, they were everything. For the first time, they felt seen and heard, not just as daughters of a wealthy man, but as individuals with a place in the world, no matter how much the world tried to tell them otherwise. The next day, one of the older girls stood up to a group of students who had been making rude remarks about her family. She didn't shout, but her voice was firm, and her confidence was unmistakable. It was a small victory, but it was a victory nonetheless. The millionaire watched from a distance, pride swelling in his chest. It would take time, there was no quick fix for the wounds of racism and prejudice, but he had made a promise to these girls. And he would keep it. This was only the beginning of a much larger battle, but he was ready. The real work had just begun. The second year of their life together brought moments of growth and some fleeting glimpses of happiness, but it also delivered an unexpected setback. The millionaire's once peaceful life began to unravel in ways he hadn't anticipated. The financial empire he had spent years building began to falter. Unexpected losses in several investments, followed by a global economic downturn, sent shockwaves through his businesses. At first, it was minor, a few deals that didn't go through, some projects delayed, but soon, it became clear that the situation was much worse than he had initially thought. His advisors urged him to make difficult decisions, cut costs, sell assets, streamline his operations. The millionaire found himself spending more time away from home, huddled in meetings with financial experts and attorneys, trying to keep his businesses afloat. He had always been able to handle stress, but this time, the weight felt unbearable. One evening, after a particularly grueling day, he arrived home later than usual. The girls were already in bed, the house eerily quiet. He found himself standing in the middle of the living room, feeling an overwhelming sense of exhaustion. His mind was consumed with numbers and strategies, but there was one thing he couldn't ignore: the mounting pressure to provide for his daughters, to keep the life he had promised them intact. As he slumped into his chair, rubbing his temples, he thought about how much had changed in just 2 short years. The girls had transformed in ways he couldn't have imagined. They had gone from being distant strangers to becoming the center of his world. He couldn't bear the thought of losing them. But deep down, he was terrified. The weight of responsibility was heavy, and he could feel himself sinking beneath it. If he failed to recover his business, what would happen to them? What would happen to the life he had promised? That night, sleep eluded him. His mind raced with possibilities, some optimistic, others dark. He knew he needed to keep it together, not just for himself, but for the girls who had come to depend on him. The next morning, he decided to share the burden. He knew the girls, as young as they were, had already experienced too much pain in their short lives. But they were his daughters now, and they deserved to know the truth. He gathered them in the living room, their faces expectant as they sat on the couch. He didn't want to alarm them, but the weight of the situation was too much to hide. "There's been some trouble with the business," he began, his voice steady but filled with concern. "Things aren't as good as they used to be. We might have to make some changes around here, but I need you to know that no matter what happens, we'll get through it. We're a family, and we stick together." The girls listened, their eyes wide, but none of them spoke. The millionaire wasn't sure if they fully understood the gravity of what he was saying, but it didn't matter. What mattered was that they knew they were not alone in this. They would face this together. The rest of the week was a blur of meetings, financial adjustments, and late-night phone calls. The millionaire did everything he could to save his empire, but the reality was undeniable. He had to let go of some of his assets. He had to scale back, drastically. The mansion, once a symbol of his success, was too large and too expensive. It would have to be sold. The private jets and luxury cars would have to go. His life, once filled with opulence and ease, was now teetering on the edge of uncertainty. At the same time, the girls noticed the change. There was tension in the air, a quiet undercurrent of worry that no amount of assurances could completely dispel. They didn't know the details, but they could sense that something was wrong. They saw the millionaire pacing the hallways, the frown lines deepening on his face, the long hours he spent on the phone or behind closed doors. One afternoon, the 14-year-old girl, who had been through so much in her life, finally spoke up. She had seen the millionaire's stress, and she didn't want to add to it, but she couldn't hold it in any longer. "You don't have to do this alone," she said softly, her voice carrying a maturity that belied her years. "We're a family now. Whatever happens, we'll stick together. You don't have to carry all of this by yourself." The millionaire felt a lump form in his throat as he listened to her words. In that moment, he realized just how much his daughters had grown, not just physically, but emotionally. They had faced hardship before, but now, they were offering him the same love and support he had given them. It was a humbling realization, and it filled him with a deep sense of gratitude. But even as he was buoyed by the girl's words, the reality of his situation pressed in on him. He knew he was facing the biggest challenge of his life, one that required more than just business acumen. He would need to be a different kind of father now, one who could show his daughters how to deal with adversity, how to survive in the face of hardship, and how to find hope in even the darkest of times. The millionaire spent the next several months doing everything he could to navigate the challenges of his business collapse, while simultaneously ensuring that the girls never felt the full weight of his struggles. They were still growing, still healing, and he couldn't bear the thought of their world being torn apart again. The setbacks were difficult, but in their own way, they had a profound effect on the family. The girls began to understand the meaning of resilience, of determination, and of working together to weather storms. They had come so far already, and now, more than ever, they would need each other to pull through. But as the millionaire would soon discover, the hardest challenges weren't always financial. They weren't even about what he could provide for them. The biggest challenge lay in teaching his daughters that true strength came not from external wealth or status, but from within. As the months dragged on, the millionaire found himself faced with an unexpected lesson, one he never anticipated would come from his daughters. The weight of the financial struggles was becoming more manageable, but a deeper, more personal challenge was starting to emerge. The girls, for all the growth they had experienced in the past 2 years, were still carrying burdens that were far heavier than anyone had realized. And it was only now, when life had started to calm down, that the emotional scars from their past began to surface. The turning point came one evening after dinner. The atmosphere in the house was lighter than it had been in a while, the girls were laughing, and even the millionaire was smiling, albeit tired. But as the laughter died down, an uncomfortable silence settled over the room. The 15-year-old, who had been particularly distant in the past, stood up abruptly. Her eyes were puffy, red from holding back tears. "I can't do this anymore," she said, her voice shaky, but filled with determination. "I've been trying to pretend like everything's okay, but it's not. I'm so angry, all the time. Angry at my mom for leaving me, angry at the world for not caring about me. I can't pretend to be okay anymore." The words cut through the room, and the rest of the girls went quiet. The millionaire's heart sank as he watched his daughter struggle with emotions he knew all too well. Anger was a feeling he recognized, it was a common thread that ran through many of his girls' stories. They had been abandoned, neglected, and rejected by the world. Anger was their shield, their defense against the vulnerability that came with loving and trusting again. The millionaire took a deep breath and, for the first time in a long time, he felt lost. He had no idea how to help her. He could provide for her, protect her, and make sure she had everything she needed, but how could he fix the pain she carried in her heart? But then, one of the other girls, the quietest one, spoke up. She had been through so much, yet she had always been the one to comfort the others, to offer a sense of calm in the chaos. "I used to be angry too," she said softly, looking at her sister. "I hated everyone for what happened to us. I hated myself. But, we have to forgive, even when it's hard." The millionaire looked at his daughters, all of whom were listening intently, their expressions filled with the raw emotion of a moment that was both painful and profound. The quiet girl's words had struck a chord with the others, and they all nodded in agreement. "I don't know if I can forgive my mom," the 15-year-old admitted, her voice breaking. "She abandoned me. I don't know how to forgive that." The millionaire felt a lump form in his throat. He understood the complexity of forgiveness. How do you forgive someone who's hurt you so deeply? How do you let go of years of pain and abandonment? It wasn't something that could be easily fixed with a simple solution. But the quiet girl's words were a powerful reminder that forgiveness wasn't just for the person who had hurt you, it was for yourself. "Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting," the millionaire said softly, his voice filled with empathy. "It means letting go of the anger that holds you back. It means choosing to not let the past control your future." The girls sat in silence, each processing what he had said. The millionaire knew that it wasn't going to be easy for them, or for him, to let go of the pain of the past. But he also knew that if they could learn to forgive, if they could find peace within themselves, they could heal. As the evening wore on, the conversation shifted. The girls began to share more openly about their pasts, about the pain they had felt when they were abandoned, when they were neglected, when they were told that they weren't enough. They talked about their mothers, their fathers, the people who were supposed to love them but had failed them instead. It was painful, raw, and deeply emotional. But it was also incredibly healing. The millionaire realized that this was the moment when his daughters were no longer just survivors of their past, they were becoming thrivers. They were taking control of their own destinies, and they were doing it together. Over the following weeks, the girls began to work through their anger, their resentment, and their feelings of betrayal. It wasn't an easy process, and there were moments when they felt like giving up, when the pain seemed too much to bear. But with each passing day, they grew stronger. They learned that forgiveness didn't mean excusing the past, but instead, it was about taking back their power. The millionaire watched them transform before his eyes. The walls they had built up slowly started to crumble, and for the first time, he saw them as more than just his daughters. They were strong, resilient young women, capable of facing whatever life threw their way. But it wasn't just the girls who were healing. The millionaire found that forgiving himself was just as important as forgiving others. For years, he had blamed himself for not realizing how badly the girls needed him. He had thought that money and success could fill the gaps, but he now saw that love, patience, and emotional support were the true foundations of a family. One evening, as he watched the girls playing in the garden, their laughter echoing through the mansion, the millionaire felt a profound sense of peace. They had come so far, and the road ahead, while still uncertain, seemed a little brighter. Forgiveness had become a lifeline, not just for the girls, but for him as well. It had freed them all from the chains of the past, giving them the strength to face the future. They were no longer just victims of their circumstances. They were a family, bound not by blood, but by love, resilience, and the power of forgiveness. And that, the millionaire knew, was the most valuable thing of all. As the months went by, the millionaire found himself facing a completely new challenge. While his business situation had not yet fully stabilized, he began to notice something that gave him hope for the future: his daughters. They were no longer the broken children who had come into his life 2 years ago, but strong, confident young women who had learned to find their voices and face the world with a quiet strength. The journey to get to this point had been anything but easy. They had navigated grief, anger, and the heartbreak of their pasts, all while dealing with the harsh reality of the world's prejudices and their new family dynamic. Yet, despite all of this, the millionaire watched with pride as they grew into their own, embracing their identities and learning how to navigate life on their terms. One evening, the 16-year-old, who had been the most outspoken about the pain she had carried for so long, sat down with the millionaire in the study. Her expression was different now, not the angry, hurt face she had worn for so long, but one that reflected a deep sense of inner peace. "I've been thinking a lot about everything we've been through," she began, her voice calm and steady. "And I realized something important: I'm not defined by what happened to me. I'm defined by what I choose to do with it." The millionaire looked at her, his heart swelling with pride. "What do you mean?" She smiled, her eyes sparkling with the wisdom of someone far older than her years. "I mean that the pain, the anger, those things don't have to be who I am. I get to choose who I am. I'm not a victim. I'm not just some abandoned girl who was lost and forgotten. I'm a fighter. I'm strong. And I can do whatever I set my mind to." The millionaire couldn't find the words to express how deeply her transformation moved him. Just 2 years ago, he had feared that he would never see his daughters find peace. Yet here they were, each of them coming into their own, determined to rise above their pasts and create futures that were entirely their own. And it wasn't just the oldest daughter. The others were slowly, but surely, finding their own paths. One had developed a passion for art, using painting as an outlet for her emotions. Another had taken an interest in volunteering, using her voice to stand up for children who were in situations similar to her own. They were all learning to turn their pain into something productive, something that made them feel like they had a purpose. But it wasn't only the girls who had transformed. The millionaire himself had undergone a profound change. He had once believed that success was measured by wealth, by status, by the size of his business empire. But now, he saw that true success came not from what you had, but from who you were. His daughters had taught him that lesson more profoundly than any financial achievement ever could. He spent more time with them, not just as a father who provided for them, but as someone who genuinely cared about their futures. He attended their school events, supported their hobbies, and most importantly, listened to their dreams. He had learned the value of their voices, and he understood that being a father meant more than just providing a roof over their heads. It meant being present, emotionally, mentally, and physically. But just as the millionaire thought that life was finally beginning to fall into place, he was confronted with a painful reality that would test everything he had worked for. One evening, as the girls were gathered in the living room, the millionaire received a phone call that he had been dreading. His business, despite his best efforts, had reached a breaking point. The last of his assets would have to be liquidated, and his entire empire, everything he had worked for, would be reduced to nothing. For a moment, the millionaire felt the old panic rise within him, the familiar fear of failure, creeping in. He had nothing left to give, no more wealth to fall back on. His future, which had seemed so promising, now seemed uncertain once again. But as he looked at his daughters, each of them sitting there, strong and capable, with their own dreams and aspirations, he realized something that changed everything. He didn't need the wealth anymore. What he had, the one thing he could never lose, was the family he had built. His daughters had not only transformed themselves, they had transformed him, showing him the true meaning of wealth. It wasn't the money in his bank account. It wasn't the mansion or the luxury cars. It was the love and resilience of the family he had created. And that, he realized, was priceless. The girls had learned to be strong in the face of adversity. They had faced heartbreak, pain, and disappointment, and yet they had emerged stronger than ever. And now, they were ready to face the world, not with the fear of failure hanging over them, but with the knowledge that, together, they could overcome anything. The millionaire smiled to himself, a sense of peace washing over him. He had given his daughters the foundation to succeed in life, not because of his wealth, but because of the love, strength, and courage they had within themselves. And as he sat there, surrounded by the girls he had adopted and raised as his own, he realized that the greatest gift he had ever given them, and the greatest gift they had given him, was the simple but powerful lesson that family, love, and resilience could overcome even the toughest of challenges. In that moment, he knew that whatever the future held, they would face it together. And nothing, not even the loss of everything he had once built, could take that away from them. They had already created something far more valuable than money. They had created a future born from struggle, pain, and love, one that no setback could ever erase. Months passed, and the millionaire's life continued to transform. Despite the financial loss, there was an undeniable sense of freedom in the air. The mansion, once a symbol of his success, had been sold, but it didn't feel like a loss anymore. It felt like a new beginning. They moved into a smaller home, a modest place that didn't require the same maintenance, the same pressure to impress. It wasn't grand, but it was filled with love, laughter, and the constant reminder that they had everything they needed, each other. And as the girls grew older, each of them took their newfound resilience into the world. The 17-year-old, who had once been so angry and lost, was now preparing for college, something she never thought possible back when she had first entered the millionaire's life. Her grades had improved dramatically, and her outlook on life had shifted from surviving to thriving. She sat down one afternoon with the millionaire, who had been spending more time with her than ever before. "I never thought I'd get here," she said softly, looking down at the college acceptance letter in her hands. "It's not just about going to college. It's about realizing I can do something with my life. I'm not just another statistic." Her words struck him like a thunderbolt. She wasn't just talking about academics, she was talking about herself. She had grown into someone with purpose, someone who believed in her own worth. And that was something he could never have bought, no matter how much wealth he had once had. "You've always had it in you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You just needed to see it for yourself." The other girls were also finding their paths. One had started a non-profit to help foster children, offering them the support and love that she had never received. Another was finishing up her high school diploma, determined to pursue a career in law. Each of them was carving out a future, guided not by what they had lost, but by what they had gained: self-belief, strength, and the unshakable bond they shared as a family. As for the millionaire, he knew that his journey had only just begun. While the financial empire he had once built may have crumbled, the lessons he had learned through his daughter's struggles had reshaped him into a man who understood that true wealth came not from riches, but from the love and joy that surrounded him. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. As the girls ventured into the world, they were faced with challenges that no one could have predicted. College brought its own pressures, and the reality of adulthood was hitting hard. One of the girls, despite her passion for her nonprofit, began to struggle with the balance between her dreams and the financial pressures of the world. She often found herself overwhelmed, questioning whether she could truly make the impact she desired without compromising her own well-being. It was the millionaire who stepped in, not as the rich benefactor he once was, but as a father, offering wisdom and guidance. "You don't have to have everything figured out today," he told her one evening as they sat on the porch, watching the sunset. "Take it one step at a time. You've come so far already, and there's no limit to what you can do, as long as you stay true to yourself." It was moments like these, simple, yet profound, that reminded him of the importance of being present in his daughters' lives. They were growing into women who were capable of achieving extraordinary things, but they still needed guidance. And while he didn't have all the answers, he knew that being there, providing unconditional love and support, was the most valuable thing he could offer them. And then, just when it seemed like life was on a steady path, the millionaire received another surprise. A letter arrived one morning, and as he read it, he felt his heart skip a beat. It was from a lawyer, informing him that his ex-wife, the mother of one of his daughters, had passed away unexpectedly. The news hit him harder than he had anticipated. There were no words exchanged between them for years, no connection, no hope of reconciliation. But still, she had been part of his past, and the mother of his child. Her sudden death brought up a complicated swirl of emotions. His first instinct was to protect his daughter, to shield her from the pain of losing the one person who had been absent for most of her life. When he told his daughter about her mother's passing, the response was unexpected. Rather than reacting with anger or sadness, she simply sat in silence, processing the news in her own way. The millionaire knew that his daughter, like the others, had learned to carry the weight of her past with grace. And though this moment was another chapter in her story, it wasn't going to define her future. "I don't know what to feel," she said quietly, her voice steady. "But I'm okay. I'm not who I was before." The millionaire knew that in that moment, his daughter had come full circle. The girl who had once been lost, angry, and searching for love, was now a woman who understood that the past didn't define her. Her strength, her resilience, and her ability to move forward, even in the face of complicated emotions, were the greatest gifts she had given herself. As the years continued to unfold, the family adapted to the changes life threw their way. They faced new challenges, but they faced them together. The millionaire's once lavish lifestyle had been replaced with a life rooted in love, compassion, and growth. And though the road had been difficult, there was one thing he knew for certain: he had built something far more valuable than wealth could ever offer. A family, a future, and the realization that true strength comes not from what we have, but from who we are and how we choose to face life's greatest challenges. They had learned to forgive, to heal, and to rise above their past. And as they looked toward the future, they knew that no matter what came next, they would face it together, with love, resilience, and a bond that could never be broken. The millionaire had set out to change their lives, but in the end, they had changed his in ways he could never have imagined. As the years passed, the millionaire's life began to reflect the peace and fulfillment he had longed for, but never truly understood until now. He had given his daughters the love and support they needed to overcome their painful pasts, and in return, they had changed him in ways he could never have imagined. The house was quieter now, as the girls had grown older, each of them stepping into their own lives, carving out paths that would take them in different directions, but with the same core values they had learned together. One evening, the millionaire found himself sitting alone on the porch, reflecting on the journey they had all taken. His mind wandered back to the moment when he first decided to adopt them, how uncertain he had been, how overwhelmed he had felt by the enormity of the responsibility. He never expected to face so many emotional hurdles, nor did he expect to be transformed in the process. But here he was, with his daughters now flourishing as strong, independent young women, and he couldn't help but feel an overwhelming sense of gratitude for the journey they had taken together. But life had one more surprise in store for him. It began with an invitation. One of his daughters, the one who had started the non-profit to help children in need, called him one afternoon with an exciting announcement. "We're having an event next week," she said, her voice filled with excitement. "It's a fundraiser, and we're inviting some of our biggest supporters. I want you to be there, actually, I need you to be there. This event is because of you." The millionaire was taken aback. He had always been proud of the work his daughters had done, especially this daughter, who had dedicated so much of herself to helping others. But the idea that they were honoring him left him speechless. "You want to honor me?" he asked, his voice filled with disbelief. "Why?" She laughed softly. "Because without you, none of this would be possible. You didn't just give me a home. You gave me a future. And it's because of you that I can do what I'm doing today." The words hit him like a wave. He had never truly seen the full impact of his actions until now. He had thought he was just a man trying to make a difference in the lives of a few children, but in reality, he had shaped their futures in ways that would ripple out and impact many more lives for years to come. The event was held in a modest venue, a small community hall that had been transformed for the occasion. The walls were adorned with photos of the children his daughter had helped over the years, and the air was filled with excitement and anticipation. As the millionaire arrived, he was met by a sea of smiling faces, people whose lives had been touched by his daughter's work, many of whom were children who had once been in situations similar to hers. But the real surprise came when the event began. The lights dimmed, and his daughter stepped up to the microphone. She spoke briefly about the work they had done, the challenges they had faced, and the lives they had impacted. Then, she paused for a moment, glancing at the audience, before turning back to him. "There's someone here tonight who has made all of this possible," she began, her voice full of emotion. "Someone who believed in me, even when I didn't believe in myself. Someone who showed me that love and family are the greatest gifts anyone could ever give. Tonight, I want to honor my dad, the man who changed my life, and the lives of so many others." The millionaire's heart swelled with pride, but the words didn't come. He was too overwhelmed, too emotional. He had given everything for his daughters, but in that moment, he realized that the gift he had given them, the gift of love, hope, and belief in themselves, was far more precious than anything money could ever buy. But the moment wasn't over yet. As his daughter spoke, the other girls, his daughters, stepped forward, one by one, each of them taking the microphone to share their gratitude. Their words were heartfelt, their voices filled with emotion. They spoke of the sacrifices he had made, the love he had given, and the lessons he had taught them. Tears filled his eyes as he listened to their words. He had spent years trying to provide for them, to give them a life that was better than the one they had known before. But it was clear now that what they had built together was more than just a family. It was a legacy, one that would live on far beyond the walls of their home, impacting generations to come. And then, as the final surprise, his daughter handed him a small, intricately wrapped box. "This is for you," she said, her eyes filled with warmth. The millionaire opened it slowly, revealing a small silver plaque engraved with a message, "For the man who taught us that family is not defined by blood, but by the love that binds us." In that moment, surrounded by his daughters, his heart full of love, and his eyes blurred with tears, the millionaire realized that he had found something far greater than he had ever hoped for. They had all found a sense of belonging, a family forged not by birth, but by choice. And as the evening unfolded, he knew that this was the true legacy he would leave behind, a legacy of love, sacrifice, and the unwavering belief that a family could be created from the most unlikely of places. His daughters had given him more than he could have ever dreamed of. They had given him a future, one that was rich with meaning, and that would continue to inspire others long after they had left the home he had once provided for them. Their journey was far from over, but the millionaire knew that no matter what came next, they would face it together, stronger, wiser, and bound by a love that had been forged through struggle, sacrifice, and redemption. The story of their journey was one of hope, of love overcoming hardship, and of the transformative power of family. And as the millionaire wiped away his tears, he understood this was the greatest gift of all.